My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and beer.
Years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July.
Hey, community policing, right? What about community dispatching?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset.
Right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch with me, Ashley, the Raspy Dispatcher. And if I am doing my math correctly, which honestly is a 50-50 chance, you should be listening to this in the future, 2025. Hopefully you had a wonderful holiday, rang in the new year safely, whether under the headset or with your family. Hopefully we're all getting a good start going into this new year, and always remembering to prioritize taking care of ourselves so we can continue to take care of each other. Now, before we get started with today's episode, let's go ahead and hear from our sponsors who are still with us heading into 2025. Today's episode of Let's Talk Dispatch is proudly sponsored by Prepared. Their mission is to be public safety's most assistive technology, revolutionizing how we handle emergencies. Prepared is dedicated to saving more lives and making our communities safer. Learn more about how Prepared is transforming emergency response at prepared911.com. Our next sponsor is Zybex Media. Since 2020, Zybex has been creating impactful recruitment films for their customers. Zybex Media offers their expertise, providing a full range of media solutions designed to attract and retain talent for all PSAPs. Visit zybex.com/media to learn more. These partnerships help us continue to spread the message that the world needs more dispatchers. Interested in partnering with us? Head to theraspydispatcher.com. As always, an amazing shout out to our sponsors. Thank you so much for partnering with us, advocating for the work that 911 dispatchers do. It helps us be able to create more resources, go out to these conferences. So if you hadn't had a chance to check them out, make sure to do so ASAP and let them know the Raspy Dispatcher sent you. So for today's episode, we are joined by Director of Parker Counseling and Consulting, who is also the Behavioral Health Coordinator for the City of Hoover out in Alabama. They have extensive experience as the crisis negotiation team leader for the Hoover Police Department, as well as being a powerful advocate for dispatchers, providing de-escalation training for them across Alabama, certifying dispatchers as crisis negotiators. This is the guy you want around in a crisis. My guest, Reggie Parker. Hi, Reggie.
Hello, how are you today?
I am good. How are you?
I am excellent. I can't complain, and I'm just happy to be here with you.
I am so excited to have you on. Whenever someone is interested in coming onto the show, I always have them fill out that little survey so I can get an idea of, who they are and, what they're bringing to the show. And man, you're bringing a resume, my friend. You've got some stuff going on.
Well, I think that just speaks to how long I've been in the game. I'm saying I'm getting old.
Not at all. Well, how did you get involved in public safety?
Well, the thing is, played basketball at a little school in Alabama, Jacksonville State University. And after finishing my eligibility at the school, there was a lot of guys who had played there before me. They had joined the university police department. So I thought, you know what? I'm used to being a team. Why not join the force and become another part of the team? After actually getting there on the team, I realized that I thought I had chosen to be a police department, officer, but the job chose me. So that's how I got started. And once I got started, I realized I can be able to help those that can't help themselves. So once that began, it just continued. The love for it just continued to grow. So I just stuck with it. And 32 years later, here we are.
Hey, 32 years later in this line of work, dealing, with crisis, and you've taken a very special interest in the crisis aspect of this line of work. What makes you keep going,
Well, just the human part of it, as far as being able to touch lives of other people, being able to, see people when they overcome. Those are the things that have helped me, and to just be able to just be there in the moment. It's just something that I like to do, and then being part of a team. I've always been a team guy from early on, and being able to be in the blue, being able to be connected with the 911 pros is just something that I've always liked and loved to do. So I just continue with it.
Very cool. Well, you've provided de-escalation training to dispatchers across Alabama, and I imagine for dispatchers who are listening are probably like, "What? Like, I need that training. We need more of that." Because I don't think what people realize is oftentimes, many times in my career, I've seen that the 911 dispatcher is the first person who's involved in that de-escalation, right? We're the first point of contact. How we treat that call can make it a different situation in a good way or a bad way for the folks who are responding in person. And I've even seen instances where our dispatchers are stuck being the crisis negotiators because the caller is not willing to get passed off to a sergeant, to a crisis trained negotiator on the phone, and we're kind of in the thralls all of a sudden. So that training is often missed for our part in this emergency response system. What do you think about that? Dispatchers needing this training, and why is it so important for them to have it?
Well, I can speak to that because the example that you gave is exactly what happened to some of the dispatchers that I've actually been with as far as Hoover. But I kind of misled you. I actually have been fortunate to teach around the country the de-escalation skills to 911 pros. So that's something I've been, that's from my heart. But I believe it is important because you guys are the first responders. No matter how you look at it, when that phone rings, you have got to be able to be on point as far as whatever you're handed. And the thing is, I want to be able to provide, the dispatchers with the skill set to be able to handle those things that actually come in front of them. So what I've done is I've been fortunate to get a lot of training. So instead of just giving a cookie cutter approach, I've done things that actually specifically helps you guys as far as when you're dealing with a suicide call, or if you may be tasked with helping out as far as a crisis negotiator. So the things that I've done has been primarily from my experience to help you guys be able to navigate those waters. And the thing what I did in Hoover, I felt like it was so important is I made sure that I had 3 dispatchers as negotiators on my team. I sent them to FBI negotiator school. I sent them to Public Agency Training Council. So the thing is, if they were tasked with having to be able to negotiate until they could get someone else on the scene to assist them, they would feel comfortable with doing that. So the thing is, I've always been out front as far as with our guys, trying to provide them with those necessary skill sets to help them in those challenging times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't think people realize how often, especially now, I think in policing in general, as well as the 911 call aspect of it, how much mental health is playing a role, maybe compared. I don't know if it's more so now or if we're just more aware of it, but I mean, 90% of our callers are folks who are experiencing a mental health crisis, folks who are unhoused, and dealing with, addiction that's mixed with mental health crisis. So we are coming across that more and more often over the phone and in person when we're responding to these calls. And I think as an industry, we're finding different creative ways to have resources that kind of go outside of policing, but still, we do have to deal with them quite frequently. So these trainings are so important.
Right. Well, some of the things that I've been fortunate to do is I was able to go back to school when you're talking about the mental health aspect of it, and the people that I've been able to contact with, because I am a licensed professional counselor as well. So those are the things that I have mixed into the training as far as the de-escalation. I talked from the perspective as a law enforcement officer, from the perspective as a negotiator, and from the perspective as a therapist. And all of those things come into play because you're right. You guys are tasked with a lot of different things that go on. And now you have to wear the hat sometimes of sitting in the seat as a quasi counselor when these calls come across the line. So the thing is, I want to help prepare you guys to be able to navigate those waters and feel comfortable with doing it, because that's a lot
Mm.
to be tasked with when you're talking about answering that phone, not knowing what you're going to be faced with when it rings.
Yeah. And then, the other aspect of it is I hang up that phone and then it rings again, right? And again
Right.
and
Right.
again. And, that's the job, but also that's a lot. That's a lot of dealing with people's stuff for X amount of hours, so many days during a shift. How do you think strategies, or in your experience, having dispatchers kind of navigate their own emotions while supporting these callers? What does that look like?
Well, I've been fortunate also. Again, I came up with a class called Composed in the Midst of Chaos, because the thing is, we all have to deal with these different emotional things that we're exposed to. And one thing that I found that we do in general, when we talk about PTSD, what we normally focus on are people that's in the military. Now, I celebrate people are in the military, but the thing is, dispatchers are exposed to these traumas over and over and over again. And the thing is, when we're talking about taking on this emotion, I talk to them about the emotion, the vicarious traumas that we deal with, and some of the responses that we feel inside of our bodies. But what I feel that has hampered or hindered us is what we've been taught. At least I know when I was growing up, it was told it was okay to be angry and pissed off, but it's not okay to be hurt. And those are some of the things, because what we'll do is we're familiar with the emotion of anger, but we're not familiar with the other emotions. We're highly, 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 I think, intelligent cognitively. And as Brene Brown would say, but we're pre-K when we're talking about emotions. Because
Mhm.
what happens is those different emotions are laid at the feet of dispatchers every single day. And what we got to do is we have got to equip you guys with different skill sets to help you to be able to navigate that, because all of us show up in that room with our own stuff too. But what we do, or we're tasked with dealing with other people's stuff as well. Well, what does that look like as things unfold in your individual life? Because when that phone rings, it doesn't stop ringing, it just keeps ringing. So how do you deal with your own stuff? And that's the things that I try to come in, walk beside the dispatchers and help them to know that what they're feeling is natural. But what we got to do is we got to learn how to unpack it, because we all have emotional backpacks that we walk around with that nobody has assisted us with unpacking.
It's so true. I did a keynote in Kansas, and we did an exercise where everyone, got to write kind of their own experience, trauma, their level of comfort writing it anonymously. And then those cards kind of got exchanged around the room. And then everyone ended up with a card and read the card aloud at a table. So, it really kind of brought back to everyone. We experience all these people's traumas, but we also bring our own stuff into these dispatch centers, into our how we handle these callers. And we are so exposed to people's traumas, and I think we forget sometimes that we
Yes.
all have our own stuff too. We are sitting, probably most likely, percentage rise, sitting in a room with a victim as
Right.
well, while we
Right.
have folks calling in. And we forget that, I think, quite often.
Right. Well, what we do, because the thing is I'm pretty sure you've heard this.
Mhm.
Suck it up. You this is what you signed up for.
Mhm.
And the thing is, I think we forget often about the humanistic part of who we are. We're all humans, and what we have to do, we have to take that in consideration, and we have got to be there for our people. And that's the part that I try to do when I walk into that room, because I know the looks on the faces when terrible things happen, and I walk in the room and there's no outlet. That's just keep going to the next call. And that's the reason I feel like some people leave the profession, because there is no support.
No, I agree. I definitely think there's a level of, you know, the old saying like this is the way it's always been, or like you said, this is what you signed up for. And we as an industry supervisors need to really be intentional with providing the continued training. So we are preparing, we are preventative rather than responsive, right? Give me the tools to be successful before I need the tools to be successful. So I actually have an opportunity at that success, rather than I fumbled through that. It was kind of okay, but it could have been better. Now we're going to implement training to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Right, right. I think we got to be authentic because you telling me that you care about me
Mm.
and then you providing me with resources, that's totally different. And that's the thing that we have got to look at. We have got to provide you guys with the resources to help you to navigate those things. And that's the reason when I walk through the door, I want them to feel comfortable knowing that I'm not only going to call you on the phone and tell you I care, I'm going to show up and show you I care and tell you these are some of the things we need to do to help you to be able to work through the stress cycle. Because a lot of us we get stuck in that cycle because what happens is we're inundated with those same calls over and over and over again, and there's not a real support system. And that's the reason I feel like you and I do what we're doing here today is to let those 911 pros out there know we care and we're here trying to do something about it.
Heck yeah. And so tell me a little bit about your counseling and consulting agency. What are the things you offer? What are some services if folks are looking to reach out and receive some training for you? What does all that look like?
Well, one of the main things I do is I try to specialize in first responders. And then I need you guys to know I consider dispatchers as first responders because you guys are the first responders. Here's the thing what I do is I know what it looks like. I know what it feels like. I know what it sounds like. I know what it smells like. Because the thing is, when you go out there, although I know you guys are sitting in the room, but you are the voice. We may be the face. And what I know that we need to deal with the anxieties. We need to deal with the depression. We need to deal with the suicidality. We need to deal with the alcoholism because all of that stuff comes about because research says neurobiologically we are wired for connection. And when bad things happen, I know exactly what most of us do. We isolate, and what we try to do is we try to hijack the amygdala to make us feel normal again when we have been exposed to traumatic events. So what I try to do is I come alongside is I specialize in trauma. Yes, I deal with anxiety. Yes, I deal with depression. Yes, I deal with all of the other different things that therapists deal with. But I come at it from a different perspective when I have someone that works in the law enforcement field because I've been there. I've been in the trenches with you guys. I've been in the room sitting with you guys. So I provide a door for people to be able to open up and feel that immediate connection because there's no judgment. And I the people that I've been blessed to counsel know there's no judgment. And what we do, we're able to walk up the steps, I feel, a lot quicker because I've had that experience of being in trenches with them.
I definitely think there is a level of they get it, you get it, that is super helpful for first responders who are trying to take that step to receive some help, some care, because I was talking to someone else about this. The harder it is to connect or to receive those resources, the more likely the person is not going to get the resources, because the harder it is, that we're going to stop, right? This is too hard. Already admitting I needed the help was hard. Now I can't find the right person. My insurance, this, that, and the third. So you being a resource that has worked in this field does understand every level of response, I'm sure really does go a long way with the folks that you work with.
Well, one thing I've found that actually helps is I share my story because that's the reason I became a therapist.
Mhm.
When I dealt with my own PTSD symptoms,
Mhm.
I told the lie that everybody else tells. Are you good? And you know what that answer is. What is that
Mhm.
answer?
I'm good. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm chilling.
And the reason we do that is because of, again, what society told us. Suck it
Mhm.
up. And we believe if we acknowledge that we're struggling with things that we're not measuring up to the standard. And that's the thing that I struggle with the most. So what I do is I disclose my story as far as how I struggled, couldn't sleep for 3 months after experiencing a traumatic event that involved a child. And
Mhm.
that child happened to be the same age as my 7-year-old daughter at the time. But when the Sarge asked me, "Are you good?" I said, "I'm good," until I wasn't good. And I had to go get some help. And I understood at that point that if I'm struggling with this, I'm sure somebody else is struggling with it. So that's the reason I went back to school to get
Mhm.
my counseling degree to be able to bridge that gap. Because when that bridge is broken down, it's awful trying to get back across and feeling like you have no help or no resources to reconnect. So that's the reason I do what I do. And I believe that's the reason I get a quicker bond because I share my story and let people know that it's normal. What you're feeling is just your brain trying to heal.
Mhm. And, I think especially, for, patrol and folks who are in the field, I think it's a generational thing, for years, first
Mhm.
responders have been told, like, suck it up, you're fine, you're gonna be okay. Even with like things, reels when I post on social media. I actually had someone come into my live the other day. I was sitting answering questions about 911, and they said something along the lines like, engineers work harder than dispatchers. And I was like, okay, just like, all right, like that's the prerogative. And like, why are you complaining about not getting breaks? Because I made a reel about dispatchers answering traumatic calls for 12 hours. And a lot of these centers are not giving breaks because of the staffing and whatever other reason. And it's just not sustainable. And but that's the perception of the public is like,
Right,
well, why are
right,
you complaining? You know?
right.
And it's because this isn't how it should be, you know?
Now I tell you what, when I was a rookie, I came in and I had to work in
Uh,
dispatch for a month. I could not do the job because the thing is what you said, it's the information that you get and sometimes the lack thereof, and God help law enforcement. And then when I hear the attitudes come across the radio, we were blessed when I came through because I understood, okay, obviously you didn't get the information because the caller did not give you the information. So I have compassion for it. And then it's the inundated call after call after call. I couldn't multitask, first of all. So I struggle with that. Second of all, it's the number of calls you get, and certain calls touch us more than others. I will use the word that's used quite often. There's a lot of things that are triggering for us,
Mm,
meaning dispatch, because if you get a call with a child, or you get a call of domestic violence, or you get a call with a car wreck, we all have different things that have happened in our life. And all of those things we have to try to put on the back burner. But then after that call's over, what does that look like? And that's the stuff where we struggle. And that's
mm.
where I feel like I have to step up and help.
It's true. And I mean, even looking back, I mean, I've been dispatching since 2018, and I have a memory of when we were in our academy, dispatchers would like pop in and just chat with us and stuff on their
Mhm.
breaks. And um, I remember one dispatcher popped in and they're like, yeah, this job changes you. And as your life changes, your triggers change. He
Yes.
was like, kid calls never bothered me because I didn't have kids. Now I have kids. And these kid calls trigger me a bit now because, you
Right.
know, this kid that's the same age as my kid. And I never really understood that until years in, where, my things would pop up and you're like, oh, like this bothers me now. and it didn't bother me before, you know?
Right. Right. Well, those are things that I was talking about earlier. We're talking about these emotional backpack. We all have them, but what's in that backpack that nobody else knows but yourself?
Mm.
Because what happens is we don't sometimes have an opportunity to unpack those things
Mm.
because people have not given us the permission to do so. And what I mean is we hide behind that shield because if I show you who I really am, I feel like I'm going to be judged, especially in this job. So what we do is we just carry it year after year after year. And when we look in the mirror, we don't even know who we are after several years of being in these positions. We don't even know who we are. And what I talk about a lot, how does that look like for you as an individual? Because at the end of the day, it is about us being as individuals and how do we help each other to navigate that? Because that's a lot, what you were just talking about. You've been doing this since 2018. Well, look at the number of calls that you had. Or if I were to ask you, what's that one call that really troubled you? When I teach class, I ask, what's that address? And people just can give me that address over and over again. And then I'll ask, who did you talk to about it? And most often it's nobody. Those are the things that we have got to change, I believe.
And it's true. And what do you think, or what would you say to, because I think the common response, and I could be wrong, but this might be just my perception. In speaking, I have the privilege to be able to speak to many centers, many people across the states, just as I'm sure you do, who just go, all of this sounds great, Reggie, but we don't have the staffing or the time or the energy to care, to put that energy towards protecting our people, because we're just trying to make sure we're fully staffed and people are answering these phones. What would you say to those centers, which I've gotten that feedback, which is like, this is great, Ashley, but we're busy.
Well, one of the things that I've done, and hopefully I'm not the only one that has done this, but what I did in Alabama is I established a peer support team. But most times what I've seen other places, and not a knock on anybody, but I've seen it most often it's just either law enforcement officers or it's just firemen. But what I did is I brought everybody into the same room. It's law enforcement, it's dispatch, and it's the fire department. And what I've seen is when we have done the training, when we have provided them with resources, how to be able to assist our people, I found that on average, when we got the monthly numbers, we had 40, 50, 60 contacts a month, because what happened is we found that they were more readily able to reach in and touch people in their areas of focus. And I think it made a positive impact where we are. So those are some of the things that I think we can look at doing without even spending any more money. Just bringing somebody in, teach you how to set up your peer support group and let your people run with it. That's been very successful in our area. That's just one thing we're doing.
Peer support is certainly extremely important. And I agree, including every level of, responder in that peer support umbrella is most beneficial, right? Because we all have exposures to the incidents at a different level. I've been fortunate enough to work at 2 departments that do include dispatchers in our debriefings in these conversations when we have critical incidents. I've also talked to many departments who still don't have a peer support team, or definitely aren't including dispatch in a debrief, and this is a huge disservice to the department and to the dispatchers.
Well, that's one thing that I made sure, even before we start doing it, we would have critical incidents that would happen. And I was just happened to be close to the dispatch center because, like I said earlier, I had to do the training for a month, and it made a big impression on me. So
Mm.
anytime that we would have a major event, I would make sure to go in and check on them. And I can remember the looks on their faces,
Mm.
being startled, being traumatized, or just lost for words because they didn't know how the officers were on the street, or they didn't know how the firemen were on the street. And I started realizing, why are we not involving dispatch in these debriefings?
Mm.
Why are we neglecting them? And then what I found out and what I started doing is how I got my position is I knew, as far as the behavioral health coordinator for the city, I have got to be there for police, fire, and dispatch because, like you just said earlier, the dispatch has been left out. And then I can only imagine how you guys felt in that room. So what I started doing is involving. And then once I started involving in the debriefings, once I started making them feel like they were validated, making them feel like they were part of the team, what I saw was growth. And unfortunately, like you just alluded to, some places still don't involve the 911 dispatchers, which is a disservice to that group of people, which I think needs to change.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a department do a whole, active shooter training, and the level of involvement, and including dispatch, was like, "Oh, you guys can be role players," and it's like, well, that's cool, but also, like, when this thing pops off, in
Right,
the event that an active shooter thing happens, 911 calls, what do you want us doing? If it's at
right,
this school, how are we directing them? How are we
right,
directing all of these parents who are flooding like, how do you want dispatch to handle this? Where do you want us to set up this perimeter? Where are we staging, the ambulance, the medics? What agencies are we reaching out to for that? Like, there's this level of we're not planning that part, and yet
right,
there's a good 5-10 minutes where we're dealing with those calls while we're getting everyone moving before we're landing on scene. And it's like,
right.
how are we training our dispatchers to direct people in these critical incidents other than just getting the pertinent information of where the threat is? Like, what is that part of the process? And we miss it often from our
Right.
departments.
I agree 100%. And you made me think of a call that we actually had
Hmm.
that was a real call. If we had have done the things that you suggested as far as preparation and understanding what your part of it is in these critical incidents, because the thing is, you guys are the first point of contact. And if we don't come together as a group and bring the dispatchers in the same room, I think there's going to continuously be chaos.
Mm.
And the incident that we had in Hoover was a 13-hour standoff.
Jeez.
And no disrespect to the dispatcher, but
Mm.
the thing is, she did not have the proper training because of was always neglected, never been a part of critical incident training. And
Mm.
when something actually happened and the information wasn't relayed, it was devastating because I knew that we could do better. But to your point,
Mm.
there are a lot of different or moving pieces that's going on that we have got to look at and be able to provide you guys with. And that was not happening. Fortunately, it's changed now, but at
Mm.
the time, it wasn't happening. And I saw it unfold and come to fruition in real time, which was not good.
Yeah, and I mean, the reality is when folks turn on, the TV, and we just recently had a school shooting. I think it was in Wisconsin.
Yes,
Um,
that is
and you know, people watch the news, they see these big events, and the first place I go is the dispatchers. Is like that event is that career changing, life changing event for them.
yes.
They're hopefully they are not dealing with multiple active shooter incidents in their career.
Mhm.
Hopefully it's just one and done. But I mean, that event is a life changing event for them.
Correct.
And if they feel like they didn't perform well during that event for whatever reason, especially if it's because they feel like they weren't equipped and properly trained.
Right.
Like that's a career-ending event, versus I was properly trained, I rocked that event, I did everything I was supposed to do, my training saved lives that day, and I can continue doing this job, with my head held high. And we as departments and as an industry need to own that a little bit and make sure after that initial training that we're not just when we get that notice that our dispatcher's continued education is coming up and we need to check that box, sure, but also let's actually be really intentional with continuing to train our people and not just check boxes. Let's give them the tools to be successful.
I love when you say that, not just having the checkbox, because the thing that I do when I do training for our guys, I pull old cases and we run through those things, and we do scenario-based training, because that's what I believe is the most helpful, is to do things that are realistic in what you guys are going to come across. Because if we don't do this, it's like you said, that's when we start having adverse reactions. Is I don't feel like I was prepared. I don't feel like I showed up and did the best I could do. And that's when we start having absentees from work. That's when we start having depression. That's when we have anxiety. That's when we have suicide ideations, because of, I feel like I let the person down on the other end of the phone. But we can minimize some of that if we give people the proper training and let them feel comfortable in knowing that they did the best they could do that day.
Yeah. And I mean, we know that this job is weird in the sense that you're not going to be able to train and prepare for every single thing. I mean, I'm sure just take a moment to think about your career and think about the weird things that come across in this line of work. I mean, it's some things you just can't prepare for, right? But there's a certain level of like a box that we're trying to stay within. And even if it's kind of slightly outside of that box, I can still reach out and like pull this in. Like, this makes sense over here. Even though this is not exactly right, we can make this relate. And so even if it's a lot of gray, we can still prepare and take some of the knowledge from the events, the scenarios, as you said, and adapt it to a very gray area situation.
Yes, ma'am. I agree 100% with you. And that's what we got to do. You got to give people something to be able to reach out. I love the way you said it, and be able to pull it back in and make it useful during that critical period of time. So we can do that at least, because like you said, Murphy will show up. It may be similar, but Murphy is going to show up.
It's a law, he gonna arrive.
But the thing is, what I've seen from my experience is when you give people the tools and then they have a certain level of confidence, even if things don't go quite right, they still have a higher sense of self-esteem than without having anything to draw from. So that's what I've seen from my experience.
Yeah, and especially for our trainees, right? I mean, the feedback that I get from folks, I deal with a lot of, baby dispatchers and aspiring dispatchers, is them feeling extremely overwhelmed, which is a natural feeling in the beginning of your career. But that feeling shouldn't continue, right? It should decrease. And if our trainees are not feeling a natural decrease, because it's not just going to turn off, unfortunately, but a natural decrease, which is happening because they're feeling more confident, they're feeling more well-trained, they're feeling validated, they're feeling empowered. If we're not creating a system that eases them into this tough job in that manner, there's no buy-in. They're looking for other jobs, as they should, because maybe that isn't the right department for them. But, we're short-staffed, we need to get butts in these seats, and sometimes we kind of miss this really important part of an individual's career, which is empowering them, training them, and giving them those fundamental tools to be successful in this line of work.
Oh, that's very important. And the thing is what I've tried to do. I tried to come along
Mm,
aside you guys and add the emotional piece of it,
mm.
because that emotional part of that, we got a place here. You in California, correct?
Correct.
What do you have out there? Disney World. What do you have out there?
We have Disneyland.
Disneyland. Well, we have Six Flags here, and what I
Okay.
always talk about is the emotional roller coasters.
Mm.
And a lot of things people have, they have the emotional roller coasters that nobody wants to help them to deal with and to navigate. And when you talk about tools, yes, we need the training, but we need to also deal with how is this impacting me as an individual? Because the thing is, when I start getting that feeling inside my body when something went bad the last time, and now I'm having to deal with this again, what kind of resources are we giving our people to help them to be able to move through those things? And that's the reason I feel blessed that I'm able to provide the mental health piece of it, because sometimes we're always second guessing ourselves in that, like I like to call that, movies playing in our head. And sometimes we try to go in there with our lonely logic and try to figure out, well, how can I change it? And don't have anybody to really be there for them to be able to walk through that dark place with them. And that's where I feel blessed to be able to jump in, step in, and walk through those dark areas with them and let them know it's normal, it's natural what they're feeling. And then what we do is we put some therapeutic pieces together and be able to get them back regulated and to be able to move through those areas. Because like you just said, if we don't do that for these guys, they're going to leave the industry.
And they would be right to do so, right? I think one of the things that, are saying here at the Raspy Dispatch is, the world needs more dispatchers. And the truth is, though, we need more dispatchers, but we need more happy dispatchers. We need more supported dispatchers. We need more people that
Right.
enjoy doing their jobs, right? And if, for whatever reason, if you're 5 years into dispatching and not feeling it anymore, if you're 30 years in, like at any point, this is not serving you, please make a pivot and protect yourself, protect your space, but our department should be making it so it's really hard for someone to leave rather than a really easy decision to leave.
True. Fortunate with the department where I am right now, actually taking those steps. It took a while though, because what happened is sometimes we have that old school mentality, which I know we all have it, but we have different generations and people navigate life a little bit different. So what we got to do is we got to come along every individual and be able to support them however they need to be supported. Because I know you've been doing this for a while, but we all experience trauma different ways. And what we got to do is we got to be able to come alongside people and help them. And I think it's imperative for leadership to understand that and to be able to support that so people can feel appreciated, so people can feel validated, so people can feel like if something goes wrong, people are going to support me. If I have a mental health setback, I'm going to be supported and not looked down upon. And I think that's what management has got to be able to do nowadays, is to be able to support people even when we have a mental health deficit, because for far too long, there's been too much of a negative stigma put behind mental health. And that's the reason people won't come forward for the help that they need. So that's the reason I try to stand in the area that I'm standing to let them know that there's no shame when you have a mental health deficit. We're here to also walk alongside you in that area as well.
Heck yeah. I mean, there's a stigma for taking a sick day, right? Like, let alone, some mental health time. Like, people, even myself, I have to hype myself up to call out. I could be in the hospital attached to an IV and I'm still doing breathing exercises before I make this phone call.
Right.
Like valid sickness, but still really nervous about calling out.
I'm with you. I teach this. I think I do pretty good teaching it, but I may have a C+ sometimes because of how I grew up so long ago, meaning suck it up, be a man. I'm like, what's that even mean now?
Mhm.
But when I have to dial the number to call in, I'm like,
And then you're coughing like extra, like like
yes,
you hear that, right? You hear that
right,
mucus?
yeah,
I
like,
swear I'm sick.
right. So, but it's the stigma, and the thing is this is what I struggle with so much,
Mm,
because I did all the tough jobs, and
yeah.
I went to 3 SWAT schools and all this other different stuff. And this is what I found myself doing. I had to actually tell myself, stop. Is if a critical incident were to occur, what I would do, the ones who I felt like were the tough guys, I would look around and see how they were responding.
Mm,
I'm thinking, they look like they're doing okay. I know I'm struggling, but I can't let them know I'm struggling. So if they ask me if I'm okay, yeah, I'm good. And that's what I think a lot of us still do. And we don't take care of ourselves. And that's where we all struggle individually.
and it's so funny because, and I think we need to remember this you know, when we're in the room with people, is that how we allow people to be vulnerable and allow people to take care of themselves is how that culture is going to be built in that center, in that department, right?
Right.
If as leadership, I think we all have this leader who is the leader, but kind of makes some passive aggressive comments or kind of like backhand some things, and just like, oh, that's the perception. But
Mhm.
if we create an environment where, like me, I always say, like, if I get forced in because someone calls out, I always vocally say, hey, you're sick, you're sick. Like I have no problem holding over, coming in early if someone's sick, like by all means.
And
And I
that's what
want,
I have done.
want them to know.
That's what I have done
Mhm.
is over the last several years, I let people know it's okay not to be okay. Now we don't want you to stay there, but it's part of life. It's
Mhm.
part of being human. Having emotions is what it means to be human. And
Mhm.
what I try to do is I convey that message over and over again because for far too long, I tried to hide behind that 20-ton shield that was not working, but I fell prey to suck it up, which don't do that. When you're feeling that you need some assistance, please reach out and get the assistance that you need
Mhm.
because people care and we want to help.
Huh. Well, what steps do you think our 911 centers, leadership, and departments in general can take to better support their people?
I think you need to find those people that are willing to help, meaning peer support. Or if you're fortunate, like our department, be able to get somebody with mental health training that wants to take the lead as far as being able to go around and check on your people. I
Mhm.
think leadership has got to actually participate in some of the programs that they're actually supporting because I feel like when the people see leadership actually being out front when it comes to mental health and supporting those things and supporting everybody as far as when there is a setback, I think that's very important to lead by example and not just sit there and talk about it because when we as individuals see the leaders doing it, I think it is more receptive from everybody once we do that. Those are some of the first steps I think that's very important to do. And if we see that happening, I think what it will do, it will continue to expand and continue to grow.
It's true. We, what's the old, remember the Titans. Attitude reflects leadership, Captain,
Yep,
right? Like
yep,
if my leadership is not representing the way that they want me to be, then it's kind of hard to act that way and lead in that way if the leadership's kind of failing. And also leadership, it's okay to say we could have done that better.
right,
Like we
right,
can learn from that, we can do that better, and we're gonna do that better. I
right.
think sometimes, especially I've witnessed in law enforcement, we get promoted up. So we've been doing this X amount of time. You're great at this job. We're going to put you in this leadership role. And then we're going to expect you to know how to be a leader, to know how to be a manager. And it's like, wait a minute, I was on SWAT for 15 years. I actually don't know how to do this spreadsheet. And what do you mean I need to manage this? And,
Right.
and we forget to train our leaders, our managers. We forget to give them that support. So give your leaders grace. They probably didn't receive the training either. But
Right.
as leaders, we need to be intentional in getting that knowledge so we're able to instill it in the people we're supervising and managing and leading.
I agree 110% because unfortunately that happened to me. When I got promoted, they put me in investigations.
Uh-huh.
What do I do with that? But the thing is, my personality, fortunately, I was able to ask the guys to help me to be able to come up to speed. And I think one of the main things that I don't think I said this, but we have got to touch the human part of everybody. And I think once we can actually let people see that we're human too and we care, I think that goes a long way too. And you can be empathetic, because when you show empathy towards others, I think it's very important as far as us being leaders.
Definitely. Well, Reggie, this has been amazing. How do folks reach out to you? How do they find your services? Are you on the Facebook, the Instagram? What's your website? How do they find you?
My website is Parker Counseling and Consulting LLC.com. That would be the best way to contact me, because what happened is I'm trying to stay off the social media
I hear that.
until after March 1, 2025. That's when I will be able to retire from the city of Hoover, because the Parker Counseling Consultant I've been doing part-time, and I can go full-time as far as teaching and other things that are my passion after March 1, 2025. So right now, Parker Counseling and Consulting LLC.com is the best way to contact me.
Amazing. And we'll put that in the information section of this video, so don't feel like you need to scribble it down right now. And we'll have a link on the website and all that good stuff, so you can find Reggie and their services and hopefully bring them to your department. But Reggie, the last thing that I ask everybody on the show is, what advice would you give someone who's considering a career as a dispatcher or a first responder in general?
Well, the thing I would suggest is to make sure it's something that you really want to do, because there are a lot of different things that first responders, 911 pros actually see and have to deal with. And a lot of times I see people come in with the desire, but if it's a calling of yours, by all means, please do it, because it is very rewarding. The only thing I'll ask you is, like when I first went through the counseling program, they told me, counselor, know thyself. I would speak the same thing to you guys. Know thyself and why you're entering into this profession, because it's very rewarding, but it's also very demanding. So what I would do is I would kind of look at what are some of the things that you want to get out of this career. And once you can answer those and it's to your satisfaction, then by all means, please move forward in doing it. Because again, I wouldn't have stayed in it for 32 years if it wasn't very rewarding. So I take a lot of different stories with me and a lot of pride in being able to help countless a number of people. So if that's what you want to do, that's something I would look at as far as becoming a part of the team.
Amazing. Reggie, thank you so much for 32 years of service and taking your experience, the good and the bad, and still pivoting and making it into this amazing counseling and consulting company. And I know you've helped so many people, and you're only going to continue to do that as this continues to grow. So thank you so much for coming onto the show with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'll be right back with you. All right, everybody, that was another amazing episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch. Reggie, again, thank you so much for coming onto the show, sharing your experience, your wisdom, and giving some amazing advice to our listeners. As Reggie said, especially going into this new year, know thyself. Whether you are just thinking about getting into this line of work, whether you are 5, 10, 15, 20 years in, there is no better time than now to do a little check-in with yourself and make sure you are doing well. And if you need any extra support, reach out for it. There are plenty of people out there who want you to be your best self. Take care of yourself so you can continue. Take care of others. Until next time, everybody, stay raspy. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Dispatch podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the show, or maybe even submitting your own story, you can do all that and more at theraspydispatcher.com. Until next time, stay raspy.